What it is, my 10 Peace and Grease here. So this vid is going to be an addendum to my basics of breeding Kavats, Kubrows, and Helmet Chargers. Now you guys have shown me much love in my basics vid, and I just want to send a big shout out to you guys and say thanks. But this vid is going to basically cover the fur patterns, the body types, as well as Kavat characteristics, imprint breeding or combined incubation, and finally some trade tips that you guys should know. Now, before we get started, we do need to talk about some changes that have occurred with Kubrows over the past few patches. If you haven't looked at your Kubrows and or your Kavats, don't be alarmed, but there has been some kind of a change to the Kubrows fur pattern. It doesn't seem to affect the Kavats as much, but you may remember Minxie from my basics vid. Yeah, she's looking a little rough. Her coat looks very stringy. It doesn't look as, the colors don't look as vibrant, the markings don't look as vibrant, it looks very thin, and I'm hopeful that DE has a patch in the works to return our Kubrows coats to their former glory. Now Zaki, I saw your comment in my basics vid. Thank you for the update. So according to Zaki, he's telling me that we can have more Kubrow eggs in our inventory than one now. That's a good thing. But there's another change that I'm seeing myself, and that is that there seems to be no downtime after pulling a pet out of our fridge. Now, prior to just starting this vid, I actually pulled Minx out of the fridge, and if you notice, I can equip her without any waiting. And there's no charge to do so. So literally within a couple minutes, I pulled Minxie out of the fridge and equipped her, and no cost or downtime or recovery time. So, yeah, that's something to keep in mind. I don't know if this is intentional, if it's a glitch, or if this is the way pets are going to be from this point forward. I'm uncertain. We'll just have to kind of wait and see, play it by ear. Alright, so with all that said, let's talk about our more in-depth information on incubation and breeding. Now, if you are looking for the basics of breeding, I recommend you check out my basics vid. We're going to go into more detail here. So let's talk about Kubrow body types. Now, there are 3 basic Kubrow body types in the game of Warframe. The first is the skinny body type, as the name implies. They are very short on stature, very short on mass. They are very, as the name implies, again, skinny, small. Now, these aren't a popular body type in the game of Warframe because everybody wants the big boys and girls. That's what they want. All right, they want those BBM and BBWs. That's what they want. But strictly from a combat point of view, it would theoretically make sense that the smaller Kubrows would be better because smaller Kubrow, smaller hitbox. Smaller hitbox, harder to hit. Harder to hit, less of a bullet magnet versus the larger Kubrows. Now, obviously this is theoretical. I haven't done any testing, but it would kind of make sense if that were the case. Nonetheless, not a popular body type. Good news is if you happen to get a Lotus in this body type, you could potentially try doing some combined incubation with the imprint breeding to try and get a bigger Kubrow, which we'll get more into that here shortly. The second body type is your average body type. All right, now these tend to have more mass than the skinnies, but not as much mass as the Omega. They're the kind of middle ground, as it were. But do not mistakenly assume that just because they're an average body type, they cannot be tall, because the inverse is true. On numerous occasions when I have bred an average body type Kubrow, they tend to be very, very tall, more times than not. Not always, but a lot of the time, at least for me, they have been very tall. If you look at Dogmeat here, Dogmeat is a very, very tall Kubrow, but not a lot of mass. Now, the last body type, and we'll use Dutch, nope, wrong one. We'll use Dutch as an example here. Dutch is an Omega. An Omega is a very thick Kubrow. They have a ton of mass. They're built like a brick crap house, all right? But again, do not mistakenly assume that just because it's an Omega, that it's tall. They do not necessarily go hand in hand. So that's important to keep in mind. Okay, so with that said, let's talk about fur patterns. So the first pattern we're going to talk about is the patchy fur pattern. Now this you're going to see if you do a lot of random incubations. You're going to see this a lot. They're very subtle, they're very low key, they don't have a lot of markings, and they're typically 1 to 2 colors tops usually. Okay? So this is your patchy fur pattern. Another fur pattern is the hound fur pattern. Now this gives me kind of a German Shepherd vibe. So because of this, I have a soft spot for it. But unfortunately, the hound fur pattern, not that popular among the Warframe community. The next fur pattern we will talk about is the domino fur pattern. That's what Dutch is. Dutch is a domino fur pattern. Definitely one of my top 2 favorites. Very cool fur pattern. If you can get it in a vibrant color, very cool looking. Okay. Now, another fur pattern is Minxie here. And she's going to just... Okay, she's not going to... Minxie? We're doing a vid here. If you could stand up for me. That'll have to suffice, I guess. Minxie is what is referred to as a merle. Okay? Merles are easily my favorite fur pattern. They are really, really cool, particularly if you can get them in vibrant colors. Lots of spots, lots of stripes, and they have that big black X on their face. Now, I referred to Minx as an Epic X. And the reason for this is because a couple of years ago there was a big thread where they started picking up the nickname Epic X because of this giant X on their forehead. And I continue to call them that. But the technical term for this fur pattern is merle, as you can see here. So this is a merle fur pattern. Alright? So with that said, let's talk about the lotus. Everybody wants the lotus. They may be wondering, why is the lotus fur pattern in such demand? Well, it's important to keep in mind when we talk about fur patterns, the rarest fur pattern is the lowest fur pattern. It's the one that's going to take you the longest to breed. As I said in my basics video, I probably did 30 random incubations before I finally got a lotus. Now, 30 may not seem like a lot, but by the time you factor in all the costs with each breeding, it can rack up pretty doggone quickly. But in this case, rarity breeds desire. Everybody wants that lotus, and everybody's RNG is different. So what it took me, say, 30 random incubations to get a lotus, it may take somebody else 90 or 300. That's the nature of RNG, unfortunately. So how can you tell if you have a lotus? What's the quickest and easiest way? Well, at a glance, the lotus emblem is right there on their forehead. So it's pretty obvious right off the bat, if you wanted to know if somebody had a lotus, if this is present. If this symbol, the lotus symbol, is present on their forehead, you have a lotus. But what if you want a concrete way? What if you want a 100% guaranteed way to tell if you have a lotus fur pattern? Is there a way? Answer is yes. You would simply go to your arsenal, equip said pet. After doing so, you would click on Appearance. And upon doing so, the very first tab will tell you the exact fur pattern of your pet. In this case, with Echo, we obviously already know, but it says right there in black and white, lotus fur pattern. And you can do this with any fur pattern. In fact, I recommend that every single Kubrow that you breed, you equip it as your companion in your arsenal. Now, the reason I'm suggesting this is because when I initially bred Echo, I had no idea that she was a lotus. Now, you may be thinking, wait, come on, Peace, that's obviously a lotus. How could you not tell? Well, for this reason right here. On top of being an Omega and on top of being a lotus, Echo is also tricolored. All 3 of her colors are identical. So at a quick glance, I had no clue that she was a lotus. It wasn't until I actually threw some derelict black in her tertiary color that I realized, yep, she's a lotus. And that's when I looked at the lotus fur pattern, and sure enough. This is also one of the reasons why I recommend you make 2 imprints of every single one of your pets. Because if you mistakenly consign a pet and it was a fur pattern that you really like, you at least have imprints to go on. You can actually recreate that pet to an extent. And we're going to get more into the imprint breeding here shortly. So my best recommendation in regards to fur pattern is don't get hung up on one fur pattern. There are so many cool fur patterns aside from the lotus. Like, as I said already, one of my favorites is the merle. The domino is also one of my favorites. But beyond the standard fur patterns you get from breeding, there are other patterns that you can get from various NPCs in Warframe. There is the Nisselbrush pattern you get during the Christmas, which is a really cool fur pattern. And you can typically pick these up from the market pretty doggone cheap around this time of year. Another unique fur pattern that a lot of people are really fond of is the Nexus fur pattern. The Nexus fur pattern is a very cool fur pattern as well. And again, you can get this from the various NPCs in Warframe. You don't have to do any breeding to get this fur pattern. And then there are other types of fur patterns that, there's the Nart Deer, a little bit more low-key with spots. There is also the Drac Kubrow pattern, which gives you more of a kind of a rhino look. Let's see, there is also the Underbrush. This gives you the more feral, wild Kubrow look that you would see on Earth, for example. So those are the fur patterns, and we're going to return Echo to her glorious Lotus self. So with that said, let's move on to Kavats. Now, Kavats are different from Kubrows because with Kavats there is only one fur pattern, and that is the Hyacinth fur pattern. So my fur pattern on my Kavat is the same identical fur pattern as yours and everyone else's. Likewise, there's only one body type. So my Kavat body type is identical to your Kavat body type and everyone else's Kavat body type. But what the Kavats lack in differences in fur pattern and body types, they make up for in differences to characteristics. And what I'm referring to is the different heads and tails that are available on Kavats. Now, currently there are 4 different Kavat heads and 5 different Kavat tails that you can acquire on a Kavat. Now you may be wondering, okay, Peace, well, what's the rare Kavat tail? What's the rare Kavat head? And the answer is there isn't any. Anytime you do a random incubation, you have an equal opportunity to get any of the heads and any of the tails. So there is really no rarity in regards to Kavats. All right? This really comes down to personal preference. What type of head you prefer, what type of tail you prefer. Now, on Valiant here, she has ball ears. I should say he has ball ears, and he has a dread tail. And maybe wondering, what does that all mean? Well, quite simply, let's talk about the differences in heads and tails. So on Kavats, for example, we have a tufted ear Kavat here, because it's so named because of the tufts at the tips of its ears, and she actually has a mermaid tail. Now, that Valiant, on the other hand, has ball ears, as we just talked about, and has a dread or arrow tail. The ball ears, self-explanatory. The dread or arrow tail, so named because if you've ever seen the stalker's weapon, the dread bow, the heads of his arrows are identical to this. So this picked up the name arrow tail or dread tail. But there is also a leaf tail, which is one of my personal favorites, as well as the peacock tail. There's a guppy tail. When we refer to ears, there is the Persian head, because it looks like a Persian cat head. There's the Phoenix fox head, because the ears resemble a fox head. And so there's a variety of differences in heads and tails with Kavats. So that's really the main differences. But let's talk about the differences, because just like Kubrows, there are also various types of patterns you can pick up from various NPCs in Warframe. So let's see here. We'll equip Valiant, and we'll go to Appearance. So as I said, one fur pattern, the Hyacinth fur pattern, but there are the Moonless Kavat pattern, which is really cool looking pattern, by the way. And there is the Nexus Kavat fur pattern, just like the Kubrow. So those are the skins that you can basically get for your pet, just like the Kubrows. No real difference there. Now, let's stop and talk about Combined Incubation or Imprint Breeding. That may be why a lot of you guys are here. You want to know what it's all about, how to do it, and why would you do it. Okay. So we're going to start with combined incubation or imprint breeding with Kubrows, then we'll move into Kavats, because there is just like the differences in their characteristics and appearances, there's also a difference on why you would use combined incubation or imprint breeding. So once you have everything to breed a Kubrow or Kavat, you can then use the imprint or combined incubation. Upon clicking on that incubate, you will get two options: a random incubation, which is totally left up to RNG, and you will get a combined incubation. This is where you would utilize your imprints. So, starting with Kubrows, why would you do a combined incubation? Excuse me. You would do a combined incubation if you were seeking a specific fur pattern and coat color on a Kubrow. So let's say, for example, you had one Lotus Kubrow fur pattern. How would you use that in a combined incubation or imprint breeding? Well, it is generally accepted in the Warframe community that you put the fur pattern you're seeking in slot 1 and the coat color you're seeking in spot 2. Now this increases your odds of getting what you're wanting. There are no guarantees. Everything in the game of Warframe centers around RNG, and this is no different. So the best way to kind of look at this is similar to relics in the sense that you add void traces to a relic to refine it up in hopes of getting that gold or silver drop, and this is very similar. You are strategically placing your imprints in hopes of increasing your odds of getting the outcome that you desire. All right? Now, it's important to note that once you use your imprints, they are gone forever. Imprints are one-time use only. Use them one, then they're done. All right? So I'll give you a good example here of how you would use this combined incubation or imprint breeding. So let's say I'm wanting a really cool looking domino fur pattern, like Von Dutch here, like Dutch, old Dutchy. So I would click on the fur pattern in slot 1, which in this case is the domino fur pattern, and then the coat color in slot 2. Now, this is the second reason why I recommend you make an imprint of every one of your pets, because even though you think you may not use, say, an imprint like this, for example, having these imprints gives you a color palette to choose from. In regard to Again here, he's got this really cool blue color going on. And I think that would look absolutely incredible with the domino. Can you imagine like a tawny type of color with this blue? It would really pop. So that's why I recommend you make those two imprints, because it gives you color options. It gives you a color palette. So that's how you would go about doing it. Fur pattern in slot 1, in this case the domino, and the coat color in slot 2, in this case that blue color. And then I would click Combined Incubation and hope that the outcome is what I'm actually seeking. But how does this differ from Kavat breeding? Well, quite simply, with Kavats, there really doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason. I have tried putting a particular Kavat head that I'm seeking in slot 1, a particular tail I'm seeking in slot 2, and vice versa, and the outcome seems totally random. My odds seem like if I flip a coin, that's going to be the outcome. But this would also make sense strictly from if you think the combined incubation or imprint breeding was carried straight from Kubrow straight over to Kavats, then it would have to do with fur pattern and coat color. Now, since there are no differences in fur pattern, right, the outcome is going to be focused mainly on that coat color more than anything else. So when would I personally use the combined incubation or imprint breeding on a Kavat? Well, there's really only two times that I would use it. The first is if I was seeking a specific breed. Let's say, for example, I needed an Adarza Kavat. If I ended up acquiring a couple of Adarza imprints, I would then put both of these Adarza imprints in slot 1 and slot 2 and let it go. I would click incubate, and my odds of getting an Adarza are going to be pretty good at that point. The second time I would use combined incubation or imprint breeding for a Kavat is if I was looking for a carbon copy or a clone of a Kavat. And a good example of this would be Valiant. My buddy Drift actually bred Valiant, and I really liked the looks of this Smeded Kavat. So he gave me a couple of imprints. I used both of those imprints in a combined incubation and basically just made a kind of a carbon copy or clone of his Kavat for myself. And that's the second time I would use it. There just doesn't seem to be any consistency when trying to breed Kavats. So that's the only two times I use a combined incubation, because the heads and tails just seem too inconsistent to say for certain that if you put them in slot 1 or slot 2, you're going to get the outcome you want. So, but that goes back to the misconceptions about imprints. A lot of people mistakenly assume that an imprint stores all of the data about your pet. And a lot of people to this day still assume that imprints store body size and body type and fur pattern and coat color and energy color and claw color and eye color and on and on and on and on. But just a couple of years ago, DE themselves said that the main focus of the imprint is coat color and fur pattern. Now, this can always change, but going by what DE stated, I would say that to focus on the fur pattern and coat color that you're seeking. And this is straight from DE. All right, this isn't from me, it's straight from DE. So with all of that said, what are some things to watch out for in trade, and how do you go about trading your pet or selling your pet? All right, as I said in my basics video, you don't actually sell your physical pet. You sell copies or imprints or the genetic code templates of your pet. So how do you go about doing that? Well, I'll tell you how I do it, and then you can use the same manner, or you can do your own way. Entirely up to you. What I do is, if I'm selling Lotus imprints, for example, I will list them in trade chat. When I have an interested party, I would invite them to my fire team. Once they're in my fire team, I invite them inside my orbiter. Once they are actually present inside my orbiter, I will have my pet that the imprints were taken from wandering around the orbiter so that the potential buyer can actually look over my Kubrow really well. And if it's what they want, we then go to a trade post and complete the deal. Now, you can sell one imprint or you can sell both imprints. Entirely up to you. Now, what are some things to watch out for in regards to buying imprints? Well, this is where it's going to get salty, because I already know I'm going to get some comments from people in the comments section that are going to argue with me about this, but I'm going to spit the truth, and those of you guys out there, you can take it or leave it. All right, so imprints, nobody can guarantee you. Everybody is in trade chat to salesmen. They're going to try to sell you something because they want that plat. So they're going to list in trade chat bulky Omega Lotus Kubrow imprints for sale. And they're going to tell you that they can guarantee you the size of the Kubrow. But they can't. Nobody can. Not even DE can guarantee you the size of the Kubrow. Unless, of course, DE goes in and tweaks the code. Then, of course, they can do that. But if they use the incubation system just like we do, even they can't guarantee you the size of that Kubrow. Why? All right. Perfect example. When I bred Echo, all right, I took 2 imprints of her and I gave them to my buddy. He used both those imprints to make a carbon copy clone of Echo. He got a very similar Echo that was much, much shorter than my Echo. He then took 2 imprints of his short Echo and bred yet a third Echo and got a much, much taller Echo than his and even my Echo, the mother, quote-unquote, Echo. 3 different sizes, all from imprints from the same exact animal. And in 3 different sizes. If the size was guaranteed on the imprints, there would be no size variation. There would be 0 size deviation. But I can tell you that 3 different incubations from imprints, combined incubations or imprint breeding, 3 different sizes. There's obviously a size variation. So nobody can guarantee you the size of the Kubrow you're going to get. You could get a Kubrow that is identical to theirs. You could get one that's shorter. You could even get one that's taller. All right, now I can already hear the salt. People are going to be jumping in trade. Oh, that's not true. That's you can guarantee. No, you can't. You quite simply can't. And if you have any doubt about this yourself, by all means, jump into your orbiter, pull up your incubator, and take a couple of your imprints from the same exact animal and recreate it. You're going to get some size deviation. All right, at some point you're going to. So that's something to watch out for. Don't automatically assume when you buy Kubrow imprints you're going to get the exact same size. There is size deviation. And I want to stress that because I don't want anybody to be misled. I've seen it time and time again where somebody buys imprints and they automatically assume, oh, I'm going to get the same exact Kubrow. You may, but again, this is RNG based. But you may get one that's shorter. You may get one that's taller. There is going to be a size variation. All right? The odds are good. So hopefully that answered everyone's questions, and we go into a little bit more depth, a little bit more detail. I want to thank you guys again. Make sure you check out my free Loki Prime vid, because for the holidays, I'm giving you guys, one of you guys out there, a free Loki Prime set. And all you have to do is leave a comment on my Loki Prime vid. Could be your favorite color, could be your favorite car, could be your favorite Warframe, could be your favorite weapon in Warframe. Whatever comments you want to leave, 100% A-OK. That's all you have to do to be entered. That's it. Okay? So, until next time, peace and grace.